All righty, so we will get started and this should be fun. We've recorded all my attempts to get going. I'm Steve Schwaitzberg. I'm the chairman of the Department of Surgery. You'll see why I'm giving this talk. We have Elizabeth. What do you do, Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I help coordinate this series.
That's great. That's of course you do. And Diane, we have Katya, with who I know, and Wahid. So we'll go ahead and this is going to be interactive, and we'll do this in seminar and interactive format. All right, so
Dr. Schwaitzberg, I would like to do some too. So if you would include me in it, that would be great.
all right, we will all play.
Thank you.
So why TED? Why are we talking about TED Talks? And you may not realize this, but there's been over 40,000 talks over 40 years. That's a lot of talks out there. And they've been seen or listened to 30 billion times. So they must be doing something pretty good. So it's relevant to our culture. They come in two flavors, TED and TEDx. There is a TED Med and a couple other little offshoots, but those are basically the two kinds of TED Talks. And just recently, they changed their tagline from ideas worth spreading, which was their tagline for years and years and years, to ideas change everything. So ideas worth spreading, that's out. Ideas change everything, that's in. So why am I giving this talk instead of talking about the gallbladder itself? Is that I have given a talk that landed on TED and has been seen 750,000 times. So that's a pretty good start. Once you join the TED community, you get asked to help other speakers. This is Nikolai Begg, one of my friends. He came running into my office one day, said, "I've been asked to give a talk. What do I do?" And I said, "Well, you say yes." And these talks show up on multiple sites. So if you just look at the main site, you get some of the numbers, but you have to scrape all the sites to get it. And so Teacher outdoes the student, and his talk goes up for 1 million, over 1,400,000 views. So I'm apparently a better coach than a speaker. And we've used this format to help other people. This is Brian Duncan, who gave the SAGES presidential address. And I spent a lot of time prepping Brian, and Brian went on from being SAGES president to the chief medical officer of Boston Scientific. So he's done okay. And he now gives talks all over the world and still calls up every now and then. In addition, if doing a TED Talk wasn't fun enough, I was given the opportunity to put on an entire TED session. This is Boston 2015. These are just a small selection of the speakers that we coached. Daniel Orfrey, pretty famous author, Peter Pronovost, who developed the checklist, not Atul Gawande, and Dana Rosser, who gave a really pretty stirring talk of what it's like to be married to somebody who's over 400 pounds and the stress on the family. And this was seen in Boston, and more than 3,000 people attended. So today's rules for this seminar is you don't need to prep, which is good. Everybody plays, which is more fun. I will call on you, which is my style. I don't know is not a fair answer. You have to play. And Wahid, if you can, and Kata, if you're in a good spot, it would be more fun to turn on your cameras so that everybody can play. And the most important thing is that we're going to try to have some fun. I'll have fun. I don't know about you guys. So we're going to start off with asking people to think about the most amazing talk you've ever seen. So why don't we start with Elizabeth?
The first thing that came to my mind was a COVID vaccine hesitancy talk a few years ago by Jennifer Mecca. And the reason for that is because she talked about how in order to change people's minds on the COVID vaccine, you have to have compassion and empathy instead of coming at them with force.
Great. Catherine, how about you?
Sure, it was actually a presentation on a group of people who created and sent up the Mars Curiosity rover. And they had great interactive pictures, and they also had good banter between them. It was really a nice thing to see, and it was very engaging because they put it at a level that everyone could understand.
Super. So I guess when you think about the most amazing talks uh, we've ever seen, it's interesting if you talk in public, you really like to sort of dissect what these people did, what they do better, what you'd like to learn from them. And the kinds of questions you asked, were any of these talks with no slides? They all had props. Did Katya, did your talk have props? Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
No, that's what I thought was amazing. That I'm so used to thinking of talks in terms of slides. And the person was just standing on the black stage and occasionally walking back and forth.
Yeah, it's amazing. Most amazing talk I ever saw, oddly enough, was by Bill Clinton at long after he was president, and he got up and commanded the entire room. He had just written a book, and he was familiar with his content, but a great orator, doesn't need the crutch of the slides, and we'll be talking about that in the context of TED Talks. Were any of these people standing behind podiums?
No.
Yeah, it's another thing. The podium is like it's like a wall, it's a shield, it's a bunker, it's a speaking bunker. And if you look at TED Talks, there are no rostrums, there's no podiums. And that's very, very, very intentional. Can you remember the opening line? Probably not.
Yes, actually, I can. Is anybody curious about curiosity?
Well, that's a good one. So a great opening line, and we'll talk about openings. We'll share some examples. And most important, and we'll get back to this, do you remember how it made you feel? A great talk makes you feel a certain way, in some way.
I felt like I shared a close conversation with a friend.
Yeah, it's a chat.
Right.
You're
And the
not-
person was CEO of CEO, whatever. And so one thing you didn't mention is that they were also dressed casually, which I noticed right away because, in medicine, we don't typically dress casually. It's just, you don't do that.
100%. And we'll, that's why I dress casually today. So, to be ready for this talk, and I give lots of talks in coat and tie. What about the worst talk you ever saw? What was the most painful experience, Catherine?
Oh, sure. Basically, it was actually at the zoo, and she read every single word on her slide, which was in a font probably about the size of maybe 12. And it was disappointing because I can read.
That's awesome. Elizabeth.
Some of the worst talks that I have attended are someone with a strictly monotone speaking voice who does not change any inflection whatsoever.
Katya.
I would agree that with Catherine and Elizabeth that reading the slides, so writing your text on the slides and reading them, this time and age sounds awful, even though this is how I was trained. That's how we were educated. But the other thing that makes it bad is lack of connection to the audience, of lack of interest in the audience. It's like the speaker is there for themselves. They have no interest who is in the audience, what the audience may care about, and you feel it right away.
Yeah,
And
it's amazing. You recognize it when you see it. There may be a phone-in number. You can use your phone in addition to being on the Zoom. As we think about these, why didn't you like it? Sometimes the speaker just clearly seems unprepared. And you said the words Jennifer Mecca, and she just texted me, which is kind of weird. speaker's not prepared. You know, the slides are horrible. There's stuff all over them. They read their slide notes. Clearly, we've identified that. There was no eye contact. They were not connected to the audience. And they're speaking in a monotone, you know, like a statue. So you wonder what makes TED Talks special. There's a number of things that make it special. One of the things that you'll find in most of these talks is there's passion. And so that, if you really watch a bunch of these, and I've watched, you know, hundreds, passion comes through. Focus, it's focused on a topic. We're not here to talk about the entire world of pancreatitis, you know, and lots of topics. They often tell stories, which is a very special feature. And at the end, there's often a call to action. And so these are a unique format. So the question I'll put out to you is, Catherine, when you're giving a talk, how much do you prepare?
Nothing to the extent that I would if I was giving a TED Talk, because I know what your thoughts are about how much preparation is needed. But I look over my slides. I make sure that I have something interesting to say about them in addition to what is on the slide, and I add to it. And I also try to incorporate stories and personal anecdotes, or anecdotes in general that relate to it, in order to make things connect to realia whenever possible.
Okay, Elizabeth, how much do you prepare?
I don't currently give long talks. However, I remember when I had to
But
give
even a short talk, how much would you prepare for a 10-minute talk?
yeah, I had to give 45-minute talks,
Sure.
and I would prepare slides for days or weeks, and then I would run through the entire talk about 3 times before I would present it.
Okay, gotcha.
So most of the time when somebody asks me to talk, I know what I'm going to be talking about. So I know the material. To me, what makes a good talk is this connection to the audience. So I usually try to find out as much as possible about who is in the audience, why they want me to talk, what is it that they want to learn, what we're going to do with it. Because to me, that's what makes the connection. I can talk about surgical site infection, for example, in so many different ways, depending who is in the audience, and that the stories that you mentioned, you may select different stories. So I don't want to necessarily call it that I'm rigorously preparing, but I'm doing my research about my presentation ahead of time.
Yeah, and you know, and we'll talk about preparation a little bit in a second, but you know, there are plenty of people. Anybody ever give a talk that you already had in the can?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Was it as good as the first time you gave it?
It was better.
Maybe, sometimes that's true. But sometimes you don't remember that special stuff you put into your special slides. So I sometimes put notes on my notes section, like why I made this slide or that slide, and you get up to the slide and I go, I don't remember why I put that slide in. That's pretty horrible. Do you ever change your slides while you were going to the talk on the plane or even in the audience?
Ooh, I try not to.
You see plenty of people doing it.
Yeah, I'm not a very good last minute person because I need to get into the mindset. So I don't want to be thinking about what I'm going to say, right? Like the morning before, the day before. That needs to be sorted way before.
Yeah, for sure. Ever used any of somebody else's slides?
I have, but I've had
Yes.
because I was giving someone else's class, and I didn't know about it until the day before. So I tweaked them in order to update them and make them, I think, more personable.
Yeah, it's pretty uncomfortable feeling though sometimes, because you're still trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, that's the worst for me.
So here's the thing. Here I am dressed casually, giving the talk that went up on TED. I was next to Colin Powell for 2 weeks, so it was kind of fun. And there was a process to it. And at the time I gave this talk, I had probably given 200 plus or minus presentations in different formats. So when I was asked to give this, I said, sure, happy to. hundreds of talks, local, regional, national, international, been on, all over the world, had already been Sage's president and was lectured on every continent except for Antarctica. So I was like, yeah, I give talks. This will be fun. I've coached a lot of other people. And then I get invited to a prep session, a TED prep session. And, we should never allow our ego to get in the way of personal improvement. So my initial reaction is, I'm busy, I don't need it. I also was chairing a different department of surgery. And then I just said, all right, what the hell? So I show up at this TED prep session, and it's not full of doctors, not, surgeons, my people. It's full of 20-somethings and early 30-somethings, TED fellows. And their reaction to my talk was, this is pretty close to the actual quote, I'm sure you're a great doctor, but your talk sucks. We'll see you next week for the next prep session. And I'm like at least 25 years older than the guy. And I'm just sort of standing there and, taking the feedback. So I came back the second week, and they said, listen, this isn't a medical lecture, it's a TED talk. And this still needs work, and we'll see you next week. Finally came back the third time, and the guy said, not bad. Good luck. We'll see you on the stage in a few days. So giving a TED talk is very different than giving some of the other kinds of lectures that for which the people, the material, you're in your comfort zone. And I kept on, refining it and refining it and refining it. And we'll talk about the process of how you go from TEDx Beacon Street to TED. But without all of this prep and without the willingness to try to be better in the process, despite taking, a lot of hard feedback, you can't get there. So, number one, giving a TED talk is not another lecture. But I would say giving any talk should be approached with a little bit of that attitude. And as you can see, I've coached, at least 10 TED speakers, but I obviously put the time in to make a real presentation for this seminar that I hope people enjoy when they watch it later. And so you got to think about what the differences are, and you can apply some of these rules to just about anything you do. TED Talks are about ideas, not about facts. And I have sort of adopted this principle early. I really don't care about talking about facts. I possess a lot of facts. What I want to leave people with is a few ideas. And if I give a talk on just about any subject, whether it's grand rounds for an hour or 10 minutes, if I can communicate 2 or 3 ideas to my audience, I am completely satisfied. And that was a successful talk. So what's the first step? I mean, this is a process, and I take a lot of people through this process in different venues. Sages did, 4 or 5 years of Sages Stories, which were sort of TED-like talks. There's other groups that do, TED-like this and that. Brian Duncan's talk was a TED-like talk. So what's the very first step is you need an idea. Remember, TED's about ideas. It's not about presenting your research directly. It's about the idea of your research. You got to ask yourself, why would anybody want to hear about it? And because if it's not really, TED Talks are to general audiences. These aren't, medical talks or, society talks. These are general audience talks. And even when you go to some of these things, you're the expert in your area. Other people who are experts in maybe your field, but not experts. Welcome, Alan Krita.
Yes.
Perfect. This is a live game. We call on people. We're at the point where we're talking about first steps in giving a TED talk. You got to come up with an idea. Think about why it's worth talking about. What's your message? And I write all of this down. What is the message you want the audience to come away with? Because once you have it crystallized in your head, actually designing the talk isn't that hard. But if you don't have your idea, why it's important and what's the message, you really can't give an amazing talk. So when I thought about, Bill Clinton's talk, and it was before I gave the Sage's presidential address, I was taking notes the whole time. And truthfully, I didn't even vote for him. But he gave an amazing talk, and we'll talk about some of the techniques that he used and they're very similar to what you see when you do TED Prep. So if you haven't figured it out, it's preparation, 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 because preparation avoids the perspiration. And if you've ever given a crappy talk, it feels awful to be in front of all those people and be giving a crappy talk. I wouldn't say I've given many, certainly, not in recent years, but I have given a few, and it's not a feeling that you ever want to replicate. So here's my rule. And you're going to, and I'm absolutely serious when this is the rule. 1 hour prep for every 1 minute of talk time. And when I get to the end, I'll tell you where the rule came from. So we've all seen these sort of amazing $20,000 speakers, $100,000 speakers. And I promise you, they look like they're just the smartest people there ever were. But when you're speaking for that kind of money, and obviously giving TED Talks is for free, but when you're holding an audience and they're paying you that kind of money, this is what they do. I don't care if you're Charles Barkley or Bill Clinton or Coach K, this is what the pros do. So when they get up on stage, they're going to make it look easy. And more important, they're going to use that talk 20 more times if they could. So when you go on speakers bureaus and you see these people that are speaking for a lot of money, they put a lot of effort into their talk. And if they're really a pro, a minute for an hour for every minute. And I'll talk about one of my experiences with this and why it's important at the end. Seems like a lot. So if you're giving a 10-minute talk, I'm telling you, you're going to spend, certainly 5 to 10 hours preparing it. I put at least 5 or 6 hours into preparing this. Seems like a lot. In actuality, for something that's important enough to you, like getting video recorded for TED or some important thing you want to do, a minute per hour is barely enough, which is why I asked everybody, how much do you prepare? So Alan Crete, if you were giving a 10-minute talk, honestly, how much time have you put into preparing a talk for 10 minutes?
So for a 10-minute talk, I think it would be probably 2 hours, or it would be an average amount of time that I would prepare for it.
Yeah, for a 10-minute talk for me, I would, and I've given hundreds and hundreds, I would probably prepare 7 to 10 hours if I'm giving the talk. And when I prep my residents, they get 1 or 2 hours with me if it's important enough. You were saying?
Did you prepare for the talk that you gave at the naval base? Because I went to that.
Yes.
Yes, that's what I thought.
And honestly, part of it is it's an honor to be invited. And I think if somebody's going to come out in the winter and brave the cold, you owe them the courtesy of good preparation. And in some ways, I'm always preparing because I collect pictures and I use them and I know what I have and I pull them out. And so some of that's included in the prep. And for certain kinds of medical things, if I see a really interesting thing, I'll optimize it, crop it, annotate it, and I will have done that, sometimes 5 years in advance, because I know that I'm going to be speaking on that topic. So there's a lot that goes into being prepared. So a couple words about slides. They're not horrible, and we all agreed that some of the best talks had no slides. So here's the first thing. If you could, take all the words off your slides. Take them all off if you can. Maybe you put in a word, one word, something for dramatic effect, or maybe put in a number. In the talk I gave, I talked about 750,000 was the only thing on the slide. So they're going, well, what's that about? You don't want people reading your slides. You don't want to be reading your slides. You want the slides to be an appetizer to your words. This means when you give your very, very best talks, you have to prepare. That's why 2 hours isn't enough. And you can't read the slides. And if you are really wanting to connect with your audience, you can't put your face in your notes either. And that's hard. It's scary, scary hard. And I think sometimes people work their way to it. They get there, they might bring, a couple flashcards that, have a reminder word before they feel comfortable enough to just go out there on their own. Have you ever given a talk with no slides? No words on the slide and no notes? You ever done that?
Yes, at the zoo.
At the zoo. That's awesome. Elizabeth?
I have not, no.
It's liberating, terrifying, and liberating. How about you, Katya?
Never. I always take notes or have a card or something, and for
Correct.
different reasons. So now I have a geriatric brain and I lose thoughts. When I was younger, I would lose words. I know what I want to say, and then that word escapes you. And so,
and I use the pictures on the slides to jog my memory. Welcome, Chang, where this is live and interactive. When you give a talk, do you read the slides and bring notes, or do you go without notes or slides?
Chang's microphone does not work, but he says that I think they say that they talk, they use notes, but not necessarily during the presentation. And again, the microphone's not working, but willing to put things in the chat.
Oh, excellent. Yes, I just opened up my chat so I can see them with slides without words. Good. All right, so let's keep moving. So now we get to the heart of it all. And this is stuff that I spend, a lot of time with when the talk is important enough. And the first thing is the title. This is your first chance to grab the audience. And so this is worth spending time on. Some titles are catchy because they're counterintuitive. Or maybe they ask it in the form of a question, and we'll look at examples of great talks. They make you want to watch the video. If you've ever cruised through the TED page and you stop on something, what made you watch the video was actually the title. So it's worth the time. And you could be mulling this over for a few days and changing it. I've actually given two TEDx talks, and the second talk I actually thought was better than the one that went to TED. And but they were looking for something. But I've spent sometimes a couple of days thinking about title for a big enough talk. Sometimes you're just, the effects of such and such medical, this and that. That's this. I'm not talking about that kind of talk. So let's see some examples. Here's a good one. Do schools kill creativity? That's a catchy title. It is so catchy. This is the #1 most viewed TED Talk in the history of TED. Do schools kill creativity? Well, you got to watch it because you want to find out whether they do or they don't.
I actually included that in a class that I taught.
Yeah, it's great, and we're going to see Sir Ken in a minute. Close second. Inside the mind of a master procrastinator, suggesting that the world is full of procrastinators and they can all relate. 71 million views recently. Bill Gates, 2015. The next outbreak, we're not ready. He said the next out big disaster in life was not going to be nuclear war. We'll talk about it in a minute. And of course, how could you not watch 10 Things You Don't Know About Orgasm with a mere 41 million views? 41 million people have watched that talk. So title is important, particularly in TED land. So here's a pro tip. And this is when I talk about slides without words. This is an F-18 and it's flying through the sky. So I'm a pilot. Flying the plane is easy. Takeoffs. And when it comes to flying, landings are hard. So what I'm going to say to you is, if you're going to go up there without the benefits of notes and not a lot of words on your slides, then that's what you practice the most. If you can get going in your talk, you'll be fine. I promise you. So I practice the introduction to a talk that I'm going to go up there and just give 10 times more than the rest of the talk. I may practice the opening 20 times until it's just muscle memory. Because once you're in it, it's like a wedding. You worry about it all the time. Once you're in the wedding, you're going to get married. You're going to finish this talk no matter what. You're going to give it. But if you can just get started, all the jitters go away. And so I spent a lot of time on the first, minute or two. And similarly, you don't want to get to the end of your talk and go, that's all I have. So practicing the closure of any talk that you're going to give. And obviously for a talk like this, I'm simply going to say thank you. But practicing the closure is incredibly important. If you're going to give a talk and you're not going to have slides and you're not going to read, then practicing these things is an amazing pro tip. All right, so let's talk about the openings. This is the chance once you have your audience to grab them and keep them. It's one thing to click on the talk. It's another thing to get them to stay. This is like Shark Tank. How many buyers do you have and how many repeat buyers do you have? So some people tell a joke. So let's see what Sir Kenneth did for his opening.
Good morning. How are you?
Yes, but it's low.
I've been blown away by the whole thing. In fact, I'm leaving.
So he opens up with a joke. He's leaving before he even starts his talk. Some people open with something splashy. We'll see what Mary Roach does.
All right. I'm going to show you a couple of images from a very diverting paper in the Journal of Ultrasound in Medicine. I'm going to go way out on a limb and say that it is the most diverting paper ever published in the Journal of Ultrasound in Medicine. The title is Observations of In Utero Masturbation. Okay, now on the left, you can see the hand, that's the big arrow, and the penis on the right.
Yeah, so she grabbed her audience with something splashy. And those people will never forget how she opened her talk. 40 million of them who watched it. Some people tell a story. I think Simon Sinek gives particularly good talks. And we'll start this off. And this is actually, for other reasons, one of my favorite talks, because I think it's important. And obviously I've just cut clips.
There's a man by the name of Captain William Swenson, who recently was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions on September 8th, 2009. On that day, a column of American and Afghan troops were making their way through a part of Afghanistan to help protect a group of government officials, a group of Afghan government officials who'd be meeting with some local village elders. The column came under ambush and was surrounded on 3 sides.
So you can see the audience is in rapt attention. And he goes on to tell the story of a wounded sergeant who, after he carries him out of danger, gives him a kiss on his forehead, and all this was recorded on video. That audience probably never budged their entire talk because he grabbed them with the story. I'm going to try it differently. I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to try to come to Bill Gates, if it'll play. Oh, wait, that's going to be in a different window. Never mind. Anyway, so Bill Gates wheels out a civil defense barrel and starts talking about when he was a kid, everybody had a gigantic barrel full of food in the event of nuclear war. That got everybody's attention. And then he said, but we're not going to have a nuclear war. It's going to be a virus. That was 2015. He got it right. This opening that you need to develop could easily take you a few days to develop because it's so important. If you want to give a great talk, maybe you're an invited speaker, maybe it's, you're going to get a chance to go speak at another school. And people, a lot of times I get invited, to give grand rounds. They're actually going to pay you an honorarium. The ultimate insult to people who are paying your way to give a talk is to not be ready and not be prepared. Anyway, so the body of the talk. So you've taken off, you've got your audience, you're feeling good, you're not nervous anymore. You just want to get to the end at this point. And the body of the talk is the most amount of time, but it's not the hardest. So if you're trying to figure out how you're going to put this together, my advice for a 10 or 12 minute talk, pick 3 things. 3 things that you can crystallize that you want to do. If you have 4, okay, 4. But in the beginning of your talk, after you've kind of grabbed them with the story, now that they're watching you and not their cell phones, tell them what you're going to say. Say it. When you get to the end, tell them what you just said. Because your job is to deliver 3 or 4 ideas that you want them to come away with, having shared some time with them. It's actually not hard with your slides that are mostly pictures. You're going to need a strong ending. And, Maya Angelou is a pretty well-known writer. I think her advice is poignant in just so many, many ways. The audience may not remember exactly what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that, I use this Maya Angelou idea all the time. And everything from giving talks to when I have misbehaving surgeons, it's not what you said to them, it's how you made them feel. That's a true thing in life. So you make it to the end. What's the process? So most TEDx talks and all TED Talks are recorded, and those talks, there is this very specific format for recording at TEDx events. They have to have 4 cameras. And all the raw footage of your talk goes to TED and gets reviewed when it's done on a stage. I know UB had like a Zoom TED thing. I don't know if they collected the talks, but at a major TEDx event, they all get recorded. And every now and then, if you give a talk at a TEDx event, you get to go to the big time and get 15 minutes of fame. It's actually 14 days of fame. So a couple months after I gave my talk, my email started just blowing up. I saw your talk, loved your talk, that was great. And I go out on the main TED page, and there I am next to my buddy Colin, fellow Army guy. And I go, wow, that's amazing. 3,000 people have seen my talk. I was blown away. My email's still blowing up. It crosses 10,000. I go, wow, it would be great if I went to 15,000. But the power of TED, and remember, it's not me, it's TED, because people go to the TED main page every day. The power of TED is that big. And within the first 3 or 4 months, it went to about 400,000 views total. And now it's about 750. And when I talk about 15 minutes of fame, I was on a plane, during that time, and somebody sat down next to me and they said, "You're that guy from TED." It's that powerful. And they could have skipped my talk and I would have had, a lifetime of anonymity, which is probably more comfortable for somebody like me. But it's that powerful. And it's that satisfying when you give a good TEDx talk, even if it doesn't go to TED, that it'll be there as an enduring material and a record of what you do forever. Even the talk that didn't go to the main TED page, I wound up doing large projects about the operating room and the consent process, because people watch these things. They're searching. It comes up as a TED talk. When I was, interviewing surgery residents, and they know that I might be one of their interviewers, nobody applying to, a Harvard surgery program would dare apply and not do their homework. And it gets a little annoying at times. They go, "Oh, I loved your TED talk." It's like, please. But that's what people do. It's that much. If your talk goes to TED, and talks from TEDx go to TED all the time, it's that much power of the social media of video. So the epilogue to all of this is you cannot coach yourself. So when everybody talks about preparing and the time they spent, and it's kind of personal, if you have something that's important to you, you cannot coach yourself. It's not possible. You'll give a good talk, but you won't likely give a great talk. So I was invited to give the American College of Surgeons Edward D. Churchill Lecture. It is selected by what is known as the Excelsior Society. It's a named lecture of the college. And it was a couple of years ago. And I kind of thought about it and said, this may be my very, very last great big talk. I'm getting old, washed up over the hill. And so I said, if this is going to be my last talk, it's going to be my best talk. So I was thinking about it and said, I'm going to get a coach. So I got a coach. Her name was Darlene Price. I'll tell you a little bit about Darlene in a minute. And I referred to her from a friend in corporate America and called her up, got her contact information. And she said, "How much are they paying you?" And my answer was nothing. And in her world, she had never actually been asked to coach somebody who wasn't actually being paid or was an employee of a big corporation, in which case you're just getting your paycheck. And she said, I've coached doctors before, but it's usually for some big pharmaceutical announcement or this or that. So she was kind of curious about the whole thing. And she said, "Well, what do you want to talk about?" I said, "I'm going to talk about blood," which is what I did talk about. It's going to be based on a book called 9 Pints. She says, "Well, let me read it and I'll look you up on the internet and I'll get back to you." So we get together a couple days later. She said, I read the book, really interesting book. And, saw your Sage's presidential address, said, I'll do it. And, told me what the fee was. And the fee was nothing compared to what she typically charges. It was just, and we met every week from the beginning of May to October, every single week. And because I was not going to talk for 10 minutes, I was going to talk for an hour. And the deal was no words on the slides, no notes, no podium, and I'm going to go for an hour talking about blood. And we did it. Met every week. And and because she lives in a world, she thinks about things that most of us don't. Too many vulnerable women on your slides, not enough strong women on your slide. I mean, just things that, not just because I'm a man, because I'm like focused on my content. She's focused on the whole picture. And I was talking about blood and vampires, and there's all this idea stuff. I had 3 ideas and 3 big ideas. And we worked every week. And she was great. She worked at 8 o'clock at night. She worked on Sunday. It was all over the internet. And it was a good thing too, because about 2 weeks before the college talk was due, my mother-in-law had a stroke and died. And I will tell you that it's not that uncommon for me to be, deadline oriented, like many of us in life. But I was ready to roll and could pay attention to my family because I was fully prepared. I get in the room, there's 700 people, and gave the best talk of my life, and was one of the most highly rated talks at the college that year. And so you can't coach yourself. Brian Duncan asked me to coach him because he couldn't coach himself, and Nikolai and a bunch of other people. So I have some readings. I'm a big book person. I almost never give a talk that doesn't mention a book. And I'll go back for a second. And because that's true, the opening that we worked on for quite a while was I got up on the stage. The college didn't know how to give a talk without a podium, which was so weird, so stuffy. So I went literally out in front of the table. And my opening line was, anybody read any good books? And because my talk was going to be based on a book, I used that. I collected, words from the audience, but I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. I had 3 Confederates in the audience who were going to name books just in case. Nobody raised their hands and said anything, and we were off and running. And I then put up the book. It was on Bill Gates' summer reading list. It was called 9 Pints. It's a great story of blood. It's not a medical book. It's an amazing storybook. And then went on to tell an hour worth of stories about blood. The level of detail that goes into when you see great speakers is phenomenal. She said, all right, towards the end, and this is the point where you take your glasses off. Everything you see these people do when you go to a tier 1 speaker is part of the plan. I promise you. Nobody's that good on their own. So if you want to get Darlene Price for free or for a very moderate thing, she's got a book. I have, for all the people that I normally coach, I don't spend 5 minutes with them until they've read Carmine Gallo's book. I don't get a cut of either of these, but I liked his book. He talks about pacing. He talks about the prep. When we did the Sage's Stories thing, so we would have 3 speakers, 5 years, 15 speakers that Brian and I and David Ratner and a few others put through this TED-like process. And so I recommend that as a book if you want to give a TEDx talk. It's part of the preparation. It counts. And that's the message. Your audience deserves excellent preparation. There are times when you should write your talk down, particularly when you can't afford to miss a detail. I'm getting ready and starting to prepare the graduation talk for the Department of Surgery, that will be completely written down. I have people to thank and names to name. I can't afford to leave anybody out. That's different than talking about ideas. So I appreciate this opportunity, and we can open up. Oh, nice. We can open it up to any questions. This is what happens when you change the formatting. You get your email truncated, but you know, I'm findable on the internet. So comments, questions, criticisms, funny little sayings.
Do you still teach classes?
Well, we did the yearly, do I give lectures? Yeah, I still give lectures.
You don't prepare for those the same way, do you?
No, I'm
Okay.
usually, it's I prepare, but differently.
Mhm.
And I'll talk about it. So I teach surgery residents. And I have 2 levels of classes, one for juniors and one for seniors. It's a 5-year program. And I have written notes about what I'm going to talk about, and I kind of have the thing down, but I don't use any slides because we talk about anatomy, and I want the participants, I was about to say contestants, the participants to be able to visualize the anatomy. I want them to be able to see the operations in their head. And we go into like incredible detail about surgery. So we might spend an hour on the details of how and where to make an incision and why. So it's a different type, it's all seminar format, and we go all the way around the room, and nobody's ever slept in one of my classes, but I still give podium talks periodically. But and I was asked recently, would I consider giving another TEDx talk, and I'm pondering what the idea might be. So yeah, but I put a lot of preparation. I put a lot of prep into graduation. And if I'm going to be up in front of the audience, when I get invited to give grand rounds, even if I've given the talk before, I'll put in 4 or 5 hours, refining the slides, changing the slides. There is nothing more insulting to an audience than realizing that you're giving a talk and the slides were made 5 years ago. I don't do that. So I recently gave the blood talk again. So I went back through, it's recorded at the college, and updated a few things. And one of the medical students who just graduated, her brother was a heart surgeon from Rochester. And he walked up, and I'd had the student on the service. He goes, "I loved your talk on blood." That's what happens when you give a talk. And one of the things that you find when you really put the effort in, I gave the SAGES presidential address 12 years ago, and I was at SAGES last week, and somebody said, "I still remember your talk. I'd never seen a QR code before." And so that's the effort and the reward, because it is wonderful to be prepared to give a great talk. It is horrible to be unprepared to give a talk. And if you think you're a nervous speaker, Katya, I'm older than you are, so you don't get to use that as an excuse, and you can still come prepared. And the value of preparation is like, I put tips on the slides because we're doing a recording, but normally if I were to give a talk, I put pictures, and they're the key to triggering my memory of what I want to talk about. And I used to be very nervous about it. And in talking to Darlene, she said, "Well, what if I blow it?" She said, "Well, what if you do?" People who give these talks, they're never the same twice. Because I would do this over and over again. And it would be, "Well, I didn't say that last time." It's like, it's okay. You're talking about ideas. Your words, as long as you don't say anything rude, doesn't actually matter, because it's the same idea. So who is Darlene Price? So she was referred by a dear friend who's the chief marketing officer for a multi-billion-dollar company, and they're not allowed to go out in public without having coaching to give a talk. They're not allowed out of the house. So that they use Darlene Price. And so I got her book. That was all part of the deal. Like, I make people read books. She made me read her book. And then I went on her website after I was all done and realized that she has coached nearly every Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 CEO who's ever been out on the road. It was like getting tennis lessons from Serena Williams and not recognizing that it was Serena Williams. And maybe that was the best way to do it. Otherwise, I would have been, too nervous. Can people coach each other? Absolutely. So I used to give speaking for excellence seminars. And one of the things that we did, we 1 week was making slides. And so I've, done a fair amount for trainees. And people would get up and talk, and then other people who were about to get up would do the critique. You'd think they'd be super nice. No, they were brutal. And then we videoed them and made people watch it. It's terrifying to watch yourself give a talk. For one reason or another, have gone back only once or twice to watch the Sage's presidential address, for 2,500 people in the room. And it's like, oh, this is horrible. I sound horrible. Everything is horrible about it. But, and the joke is, if you can't sleep, go watch the presidential address that year. The biggest single thing that recording yourself, you can do it on Zoom. Sometimes you give talks on Zoom, you can record yourself on Zoom, is pacing. Many people have the problem of speaking too fast. The hardest thing is to slow yourself down to let the audience catch up to what you're trying to say. And yet, if you stayed at that same pace the whole time, and you could say, I slowed down and then I pick the pace back up. If you stayed at a slow pace the whole time, they're going to be asleep on you. But when you're getting to a big idea, sometimes you say it twice. Sometimes you slow it down, because if you're saying something that you think is really monumental in your talk, they've got to process it. That's why you don't want people reading your slides. They have to catch up to what you said. And if you, and that's why it's worth watching. I've had residents, I'd go through and I go, slower. I'm talking slow. No, you're not. You sound like somebody from New York City still moving at 98 miles an hour. That's the thing that people have the hardest time with, is allowing the audience to let the words soak in. And that takes practice. If I'm up on the podium, I am in my presentation mode. I talk at a different pace than when I'm sitting around talking to people. And I pause. I didn't realize that I paused. I had a trainee, Dan Heron, is a professor of surgery at Mount Sinai, had been a fellow in my lab years earlier. And he said, how do you learn to pause? I go, what do you mean? He goes, you have this knack of stopping after you say something you think is important and letting it soak to the audience. So pacing and pausing to let people really, grasp an idea is part of the special sauce when you're on a roll. So I hope everybody gets a chance to give some great talk in their life, because the preparation will seem painful, but the rewards are extraordinary when you get there.
Steve, can I ask you one question?
Sure.
So if you can remember, so that time that you came for the prep for the TED Talk, and the whoever that person was told you that your talk was horrible. And I'm sure, as a experienced academic, you prepared a very good academic talk. So what were the biggest comments, suggestions, and edits that you had to make a good academic talk, a good TED Talk?
You're not talking to doctors. You're talking to everyday people.
Well, but so as a doctor, you talk to everyday people, right? You talk to your patients. So
you do, but and we explain surgery in everyday language, but it's less words, more ideas. When you're talking about all the complications of surgery to your patients, you got a lot of material that you need to cover in a relatively short amount of time. It's not the facts that you want to leave them with.
Mhm.
It's the ideas that they wanted to come away with. And what I was talking about for TED was the value of, at that time, revolutionary technology that I had developed with IBM about two-way bi-directional video so we could teach surgery across the ocean. And we were talking about how people learn to do complex things and how we got there. And it's a lot of little things, like I'm talking about laparoscopy, but it's like they don't know what laparoscopy is. So I brought a prop out onto the stage. I brought a laparoscopic, I had a little table and had my little props. And I told a few jokes, about, consent forms and things like that. And they were right. I'm used to talking to a patient where I get to size up a level of medical literacy and move what I'm saying to them up or down. Now you're doing that for a whole room of people, all different levels of comprehension to what you're saying. It's a little bit like Harry Potter that was written on multiple levels. If you really thought about that, it's a kid's book. I was a very early Harry Potter fan and took a lot of ribbing from my wife. It's a kid's book until she read it, realized that the book is written on many levels. That was the message of trying to connect to the audience, which is very different than when you're one-on-one. It's a very different experience. In one-on-one, in a clinic room, it's not the same thing than when you have to connect to a whole room full of people, which means you have to make eye contact all across the room. Sometimes that's hard if there's a light in your eyes. You have to let them catch up to what you're saying. And so it's not the same as talking to one patient. And that's what they were right about. And quite frankly, physicians are used to using a little bit of jargon. I tried to take all the jargon out of my talk. That's hard because to me, it's like, drinking water. This is the language we use every day. I thought about every single word that went in the talk. I wrote it down. I had notes on every slide. I practiced each slide 30 times, 40 times until I could just give the talk. And that's the level of prep. And I didn't give the best talk of the day. I saw somebody talk about, and this is the thing that's amazing, about women superheroes in movies, and he was talking about in the context of his role models for his daughter. And I go, that's a great talk. And sure enough, that was picked by TED also. And, it was viewed oodles of times, many, many, many more times. But I could remember the way I felt about it because I don't have a daughter. But I just remember the power of the imagery that he was creating with his words. And that's very different than talking to a single patient. So when you're doing TED, you want your words to create imagery. So Simon Sinek, when he was talking about this whole thing, the battle, you can see the battle. You can see him carrying, the injured sergeant, to the aid station. You can see him kissing him on the forehead because he's creating imagery with his words, because nobody's got any words to read on the slides. And TED is, you stand in a circle. You're mic'd up and you can have a clicker if you're going to show some slides, and you have to stay in the circle. It's a big circle, but it's a circle.
Yeah, we can do that for grand rounds.
Yeah, I think it's fun to do that for grand rounds. At our social justice and health equity lectureship, the speaker got out from behind the podium, and he was very, very well prepared. In fact, as somebody who studies this, I walked up to him and I said, that is an amazing amount of preparation. Have you given it before? He says, yeah, a couple of times. I said, how long did it take you to do that? And he said, 30, 40 hours. And you were there for the talk. That was an amazing talk.
Yeah.
30 hours.
Easy. It sounds like a lot, but if you think about it, it's really not that much.
Yeah, it's great. Anybody have any questions in the chat?
If you have questions, please place them in the chat.
appreciate your feedback. You can't be any worse than what I got when I prepped my first TED Talk the first time, so I can take it. And I hope you enjoyed it. And it's a beautiful afternoon.